Hi there. We've all got more questions than answers right now. What this whole saga has shown us is just how hard it is to remove owners who simply don't want to let go. Sadly, our fan base is divided on who they want our owners to be, and there's a lot of frustration about this not being an immediate full sale. Personally, I'm speaking purely as a fan with no vested interest or commitment to either of the parties involved. No one pays me to share my thoughts. And if you don't agree with me, that's fine, but I am uncensored. And I think it's important to make that distinction in this era of spin and counterspin. Personally, I've got to say I am more optimistic about the future now than I was before the weekend. The news that the Glazers have agreed to allow Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the Ineos Group to buy 25% of the club for an estimated £1.3 billion is certainly not the outcome we all wanted when this process began. But we have to be realistic here. There's nothing currently forcing the Glazer family to make a full sale. The Qataris admitted as much when they withdrew from the bidding over the weekend. So, like it or not, co-ownership and phasing out the Glazers over a period of time is the only play left at this stage. The alternative is the Glazers carrying on as they were before. Let's face it, they could have simply sold shares to anonymous investment bankers, but Sir Jim Ratcliffe and the Ineos Group have stepped up and they're not here just for vanity. I'm sure they have a master plan. There's no way one of Britain's most successful ever businessmen and his company is sinking £1.3 billion just to keep the Glazers in power. Surely there'll be a roadmap to full ownership. Meantime, taking over full control of all football operations is a real commitment. Talk about putting your money where your mouth is. It certainly is a high-risk gamble by Sir Jim, because it takes all the blame off the Glazers if it doesn't work out. Now, just to be clear, I'm not saying I'm blindly supporting Sir Jim Ratcliffe. Like any sane individual, I want to hear all the details first, and I want to hear the vision for the future from our new co-owners. I want to hear them say it with their own mouth. Assuming this deal is signed off by this week's board meeting, I think that's going to be on Thursday, I am cautiously optimistic, and I do say cautiously. Meantime, I'm hugely relieved that we're not selling our soul to Qatar. Unlike the masses who seem to want to win whatever the cost, I'd rather do it without being state-owned. So many people keep telling me that's the only way to compete with Manchester City and Newcastle United. But I still maintain this football club doesn't need the riches of Qatar to get back on the winning track. Even in decline, this football club has enormous commercial power. Only last month, United announced the biggest shirt sponsorship in world football. A £60 million a year deal with Calcom to put their Snapdragon brand on our shirts from next season. Calcom, a company, as it happens, already a business partner with Ineos. Then there's a new Adidas commitment, a new 10-year kit deal with Adidas worth £900 million. Imagine how much more money this football club can self-generate when we get back to winning ways with a more efficient, more responsible leadership in control. The real value of Manchester United Football Club is embedded in the size of our global fan base, and there's a growing realisation that new streaming possibilities and broadcast money further down the road will drastically increase our revenue potential. That's why the Glazers want to keep their finger in the pie as long as they possibly can. Now, the only reason getting the Glazers out in the first place became a possibility was the fact the owners have been guilty of such poor management. Poor management handicapped by debts now approaching £1 billion, and all contributing to cash flow problems that led to this desperate call for investment in the first place. Make no mistake, that is the real problem, and that is down to the Glazers. It's certainly not the fault of Sir Jim Ratcliffe and his team trying to find a solution. Finding a way to fund fixing the team, the stadium and the training ground has always been the main objective. That's why the Glazers appointed the Rain Group to explore options in the first place. That's why there must be more to this than the Glazers simply selling 25% of the club's shares. That only puts money in the Glazers' back pocket unless they suddenly change their habits of a lifetime and invest that money back into Manchester United Football Club. It's money to fund the football club both on and off the pitch, that's badly needed, along with strong leadership to make sure that money is well spent. Of course, the attraction of the Qatar bid was the perception that this could all be done overnight. At least that's how it was spun. But the Glazers, it seems, just don't want to sell to Qatar. So where does that actually leave us? Until we see Ratcliffe's master plan and we're told exactly how he's going to fund his vision for the football club, it's all speculation. But we all know the big questions. How are we going to manage our debt? How are we going to fund our stadium and training ground update? Who's going to be in charge of the football department? The answer to these questions and many more will ultimately determine the public perception of this co-ownership deal. What's clear is that we need strong, decisive leadership and a football department that really knows what it's doing. We need to be doing what Brighton do, for example, and doing it on a much bigger scale. Now there's a football club with impressive long-term vision and outstanding recruitment. Now when this auction kicked off nearly a year ago, both Sheikh Jassim and Sir Jim Ratcliffe had their eye on taking full control of our football club. But we all knew a while ago that the Glazers are not ready for a full sale at this stage. And that's where it seems Sir Jim Ratcliffe has used his charm and his negotiating skills to find a way. Now we need the details. We all want to know what the roadmap is to the Glazers completing a full sale of Manchester United Football Club. From what we've heard already, Sir Jim has an agreement that his organisation takes full control of the football side of the business. Many of us have long called for a top-class director of football, and it's well known that the highly qualified Paul Mitchell is on the Ineos shortlist. They tried to sign him up for Nice a while ago, but Mitchell recently left Monaco to return to the northwest, and he's currently available. That may well be bad news for the current head of player recruitment at Manchester United, John Murtough. It's highly likely that Sir Jim will want to make several marquee changes, and this club has long needed a top-notch director of football. That, for starters, would be a positive step in the right direction. What I don't expect is a change of manager. Eric Ten Hag surely has the rest of this season at least to continue his revolution on the playing side. I'm sure Ten Hag is hoping a new football administration will give him more support. Whether or not there's going to be any extra funding in place to spend big in the winter transfer window is one of the big details we all want to know about. As I've said already, how the new ownership model intends to fund the club going forward is a fundamental question we need answering. I'm certainly not expecting that any of the money Ineos pays the Glazers will be invested back into our football club. The Glazers have not invested in Manchester United since the day they took over. We're not expecting them to start now. The most likely scenario is that Sir Jim Ratcliffe is banking on improving the club's self-generated funding model. But without a plan in place to bring in substantial funds to pay off our debts while also fixing the stadium and the training ground, Sir Jim will be given a hard time by our fans. Seeing off the mega-rich Qataris has been a superhuman effort by Sir Jim, but the club needs substantial funds investing to move forward. And despite a public perception to the contrary, Ineos do have substantial resources. They are a multi-billion-dollar company. So we wait to see how much they'll invest in the football club over and above what they're paying the shareholders. Now, since Sheikh Jassim withdrew his bid, we're seeing a social media outpouring from those who still believe the Qataris are the only answer to our problems. The truth is, though, Qatar are only interested if they own the good name of Manchester United Football Club, lock, stock and barrel. To them, it's all about bragging rights and validating their oil-rich state that crosses so many lines. Personally, I've always spoken out against state-sponsored ownership of any elite football club long before the Qataris announced their interest in Manchester United. But that doesn't mean I'm in favour of the Glazers remaining in any position of influence at our football club. Unless there's a buyout option or a realistic plan going forward, I do think Sir Jim is walking a dangerous tightrope. It's not a secret I did campaign for Sir Jim to buy Manchester United Football Club long before the Glazers announced they were open to doing business. But equally, I've always said my preference is for a fan ownership model like the one we see over in Germany. In an ideal world, I'd like to see fans offered shares in our football club. But there'd have to be shares with equal voting rights to the owners. No more of this second-class system which the Glazers created. If Sir Jim wants to win over the fans, he's got to come up with something convincing. Whatever his master plan entails, I sincerely hope is going to communicate and be visible. We need to hear from our owners. It doesn't help when the Glazers never speak publicly to the fans, and I do expect a different approach from Sir Jim. I certainly think he'll be far more visible than Sheikh Jassim ever would be. Throughout this whole process, the Sheikh has been even more invisible than the Glazers. Ultimately, though, it's success on the pitch that our fans really care about. And Sir Jim's stated aim has always been to make Manchester United Football Club great again. What gives me hope is my belief that he's not doing this purely to make money. Whether or not that's the case, I think we'll have a better idea when Sir Jim tells us what's in his master plan. Until then, it's impossible to make any real assessment of whether or not this is a good deal for Manchester United Football Club.